Yeah, I usually pin the date on that because I think they get recorded and then.
Oh, okay. Okay.
That's all right. In the title language, but that's all right.
Yeah.
I'm not sure there's a great audience for the Lakes and Ponds meetings anyway. Although Dave Ray said he watched the few of the broadband meetings, which shocked me.
Oh, you have an audience? You need more distance. Might be
Yeah,
more.
I'm going to go over there. So we
Yeah.
will plug in my.
Yes. Do you have a garden that you possibly take a picture of?
Definitely.
Okay.
Definitely.
Sure.
One or two, please.
Small.
Yeah, I got one, got a couple got away from me.
Don't have much of anything for gardens here. Some tomatoes.
So I think Rich is planning to join us too.
In person.
No, I thought on.
Online, I think, yes.
Well, join, please. Give us the ad. Otherwise.
Yeah, I think it's the old use of the term, coming together. Tony and Whitney, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so I can hear you.
It's a little
it is
garbled.
Very garbled.
Okay,
Yeah.
is this any better?
Yes,
A little bit, huh? Great.
yes.
Yeah, I think you have to be sort of
Close.
direct to the microphone on these. But you need to put the zoom up on the full screen. Yeah. You don't really care about YouTube. You can shrink YouTube and. I think that's the oh, is that the Zoom? Okay.
I should be able to get it bigger than this though, shouldn't I? With, maybe if I just go to escape, well, it makes it smaller.
That's the meeting on YouTube, and we want the actual Zoom meeting.
Yeah.
So it's actually live streamed.
Yes, what appears on YouTube is exactly what we see on Zoom, I think. It's just
With everyone in attendance, or just us here tonight? Do you know?
what's the question?
Do you know if the recording records the people who are online, or just the people in here?
No, it will be all their audio, and it will be the video that we see up
The
here.
video also.
I wonder if I've got everything up there now on screen.
Well, you're still in YouTube mode. Okay.
It says Zoom at the bottom, but I guess that's what it's playing on YouTube.
Yeah, that's what's going on YouTube. So is there a way to minimize this?
Yeah, here is a yellow. I have to minimize it. So I could shut it down, but I don't.
I don't know how to do this.
You all sound water.
Just then, as they slid up, the screen slid over to their main screen, you could see the two of us.
Yeah.
Right, I think we need to get to the Zoom screen so we can admit Rich if he's in the waiting room.
Well, I don't know how to do it. So all you Apple people, how do you bring an application to the front?
Times this.
How about back to me now?
There we are.
There we are.
Oh. But what happened to that?
So Rich should come up.
Yep.
I think they only like 3 people at the meeting.
And
Hello, Rich.
Hi,
And you
Good
can
to see you.
choose the display mode that you want.
Where's that camera find us all?
It's pretty clear. I don't know how it does.
is.
Yeah, that looks good like that,
How's
I
that
think.
work?
Well, who knows?
Why do you get that? Because I'm very sad. Yeah, but what about our leader?
I just need to speak up, I think. There I am, right, underneath Rich. Yeah.
So you've got them. Doesn't matter to me.
David's usually not visible when he's over there. Then put in
So welcome, everyone. We'll get the meeting started. Thanks to Jay and his directions and his presence, I was able to pull it off this time. But I think in the future, we might want to get more of us educated. So maybe at the next meeting, someone else can volunteer to try to make it happen.
I wrote up the initial instructions, Mary, to do this, so we'll see whether they might need a little enhancement.
Yeah, we'll take a look at
For
them
the
and see.
next
Right.
person will get a better set of instructions.
Can everybody hear me?
You sound underwater. Can you?
Okay. I'm gonna take my mask off since I'm distanced from others, and maybe this will be clearer. Is that any clearer?
A little bit, maybe. I thought last time if you talked into your microphone or had it closer to you or something.
Yeah, I'm about to swallow it.
Oh, no. Not any good.
Maybe this other microphone would work. How about this? Does this sound any better?
It's about the same. Is
About the
it,
same.
is it possible that the proximity of the two microphones in front of you is the issue?
Yeah, I'm not hearing any feedback, but how about this? Not much better, huh?
Not much better.
How about with other people try speaking and see if they hear it more clearly?
Can you hear me?
It's about the same.
How does this sound?
Worse. Sorry.
How's this? I'm very close to the mic. Can you hear me?
So that might be just.
I
Okay, we're gonna turn
hear
up
you.
we're gonna turn up the gain. We'll see if it works. Is this any better?
It's about the same.
About the same.
No, you're sounding faint.
Maybe it's
Center
super
set. Only sounding faint.
Can you hear anything now? I've got it turned all the way down.
It's not that, it's not the gain. It is not
Okay.
not really making much of a difference.
Let's try this one here.
did you try
Oh, wait.
just one mic last time? And one mic in the room? Is that possible?
Rich is pretty clear.
So, how does this sound? Is this better?
No, it's about, keep talking.
Okay, I'll keep talking and I'll turn it up. There's another dial back here.
No, it's about the same.
No, it isn't.
What was what was much better was Rich's voice. I don't know that that is helpful, but just,
Well, I'm wondering if last time you turned off the mics and just used one mic in the room? Did you try that?
Last time was turn off the owl on them.
Actually, the owl is supposed to turn to anyone in the room who is speaking without a microphone.
Okay, so we could try that, I guess.
Yeah, give it a try because Your voices are breaking up a lot.
How's this? Is it any better?
We need to
So
turn this off.
we'll turn off the microphones and see if it makes a
Yeah,
difference.
turn off the mics and try one.
How do you turn it off?
I won't stay off.
So maybe the microphones are connected to it as well?
Well, even though you can't hear us well, can you hear us?
That's better. That's better.
That's better.
Much better.
Much, much better.
Jay, I don't know if you turned the mic off or what, but that was, yeah, now you're clear.
Okay.
That's it, yeah. As far as I know, we didn't do anything.
We just pushed our buttons.
Yeah, we pushed a button right on the microphone.
Well, try that.
Are you better now?
Well, use your microphone.
Jay,
Is it? Better?
yeah, I think so.
Okay, good.
Good,
Yeah, that's better. Okay.
great. Well, let's get started. And go over Tony's minutes that he sent out, I believe, earlier today, as well as about a month ago. Any comments on the minutes?
Doesn't sound like it.
I move they be approved.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Approved. Great job, Tony.
Good.
Thank you, Tony.
And let's do our pond by pond, lake by lake. And why don't we start with Coleman Pond? And I guess before, so rather than you having to take notes on this, Tony, we can send you a paragraph. And if we can just give the highlights as we go around at this point, it would be good, if that's okay.
Right, I've received Pitcher Pond from Rich, Coleman Pond from Whitney, and Moody Pond from Lise so far.
I thought that was the deal, that we were supposed to send it to
Yes,
him in
yes.
advance of the meeting,
Right,
right?
yes, I didn't see any of those. I
I
think it-
sent it just directly to him.
Okay.
So that he wouldn't be bored when I gave it.
Okay, let's go with Coleman Pond.
So the water is low. It's very quiet. Maybe it's partially to do with the weather. Kayaks, paddle boards, a few fishing boats, but I haven't seen the tubers and skiers lately. There was one boat that had tubers and skiers. And there's no beaver activity at the dam. So that's it.
Good, let's turn to Moody Pond.
Okay, well, we have 3 Lansing residents, and at first they were very standoffish and wouldn't get close, but now they're friendly and come down when I go down and circle around me and talk.
And are they all adults, Lise, as far as you can tell?
As far as I can tell, they are about the same size, but I don't really see them that clearly that I could. But wouldn't a young loon be big by this time?
It would be.
Depends.
Yeah.
Depends.
Depends. There was some I know on Hobbs Pond, there's one pair that looks really grown, and then the other pair must have been a re-nest. Probably must have come in because they're still just half the size of the adults. They're still, we're wondering whether they're gonna be big enough to fly.
Take care of themselves in the winter. Okay, so the water level's about the same as it normally is in August, with the exception of last year. And last year, the water was very high because of the beaver activity at the outlet. So this year, it's sort of normal, and it's not as low as it was several years ago. So I would say it's about average for the past 40, 50 years. But the weeds are extremely dense, and no water is going in or out of the pond. And I had a canoe trip with Aaron Bailey, and we went over to the outlet, and the water is just slightly below the top of the outlet. And it's just sitting there, but however, there's water beyond the outlet going down that Mariner's Brook, and that possibly could be because Paul Weaver put in a pipe a long time ago, and there's the pipe is still there, and it goes under the outlet.
It's very garbled.
Yeah, it's hard to understand, Lise.
Yeah,
Okay, well, maybe I better take my mask off then. Is that better?
Not really. Try turning your microphone off.
Is this better?
yes.
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay, well, no water is going currently in or out of the pond. And lots of weeds, very thick. And there were metaphyllon blooms observed in the same place as last year, to the left of the Cassins dock and by the weeds. It's not right by the dock, but it's sort of in that direction on the other side, the southwestern side of the pond. And we also were paddling in what used to be the lily pond, but the lilies have migrated and gone all around the lake. But it's still, it's a lot of weeds over there, but also a fair amount of lily pads, no actual lilies as there used to be. And so a lot of the metaphyllon blooms over there. And a lot of them were, according to Aaron, dead because they were down at the bottom. But there were some that were on top and seemed alive. And I got a piece of paper about them. I mean, apparently they're in a lot of lakes. And you just have to be able to recognize them. I know that Paul Lieber was not particularly concerned last year, and he's going to come out because we didn't do any dissolved oxygen testing, and we didn't do a couple of other tests, and he's going to do that, so I'm going to go out with him.
And that metaphyton is what you see under the water that looks like green cotton candy?
Yes.
Very, very fine filaments and about the same
Yeah.
size.
And according to Aaron, it's dead if it's underwater. The stuff that's on top of the water with little globules in it is alive and functioning. And it's a phenomenon in Maine lakes now, unfortunately, and probably due to our warming.
And from what I've read too, it really doesn't say anything about pollutant levels or nutrient levels. You can
Well, I
find
don't think
very
they
clean
know,
lakes
judging
and very
from this
clear lakes.
article that I read. I would say that everybody's on a learning curve about it, and people don't really know. But it is new.
What's the date of the article? I'd just be curious.
It was under Belgrade Lake, from the Lake Monitoring, Maine Volunteer Lake Monitoring Program, Hannah Sweet, Dr. Wilson, and I don't
Okay.
quickly see any date from the University of Southern Maine. I don't know. I think people are still trying to figure it out. I know Paul Leeper is. Okay, so that's maybe.
Thanks. And I did take a canoe trip, yes.
Could you repeat the testing she talked about? We couldn't understand it.
We were saying the name of this plant, this algae, is metaphyton.
Uh-huh.
And from what I've read, they're finding it in both clean lakes and lakes that aren't so clean, clear lakes. They're really not quite sure what it's associated with. I remember seeing it in Maine lakes over 20 years ago, but that was
Yes.
a lake that was on the New Hampshire-Maine
Oh.
border.
Well,
But it's
that's
coming
what-
up into this area more recently.
Paul Leeper says he's been seeing it around here for 20, 30 years.
Oh,
Is it getting worse? He wasn't commenting on that.
Mhm.
And we didn't paddle last year through what used to be the Lily Pond, so I'm not sure, I can't make a comparison between this year and last year.
Did you mention some type of testing that would happen or no?
We're going to have, Paul Leeper, I'm gonna go out with Paul Leeper, and we're gonna do some dissolved oxygen and testing.
Oh, dissolved oxygen. Okay.
Yeah, that has not happened yet.
Right. Thanks.
But it's nice getting to know Aaron,
Mhm.
go around with it.
Thanks, Lise.
Gary, I just want to say that as we can't hear a lot of it because everything's so garbled, it makes the written pond reports that much more valuable.
Okay, I'll send mine to everybody.
Yes.
I have it, Lisa. You already did.
I sent it to you, though. I didn't send it to everybody, 'cause I wanted them to be breathless when they heard.
No, we'll see it in the minutes when Tony sends it out. That's great.
I'll send the minutes out in a couple of days and then everyone will see it and you don't have to.
Okay, thank you.
That sounds good. Rich, how about Pitcher Pond?
Pitcher Pond. Water remains extremely low. There've been a few minor incidents with boats hitting rocks. More rocks are visible. Nothing serious that I've heard about in terms of accidents. The survey I did on docks and floats showed dramatic improvement this year. And I think that went along with a lot of upgrades on camps around the lake. Strikingly, a lot of construction has happened this past year, apparently, and people have replaced docks and floats more. A lot more boat activity the last several weeks. What else? The beavers have given up at this point, trying to block the outlet to the mill pond, which is helpful. But you know, it's a tough job getting any large boats in and out of the lake because it's so shallow in the. I mean, it's not easy even when the water's at normal heights, but now that it's so low, it's difficult to launch a boat and get into the pond through the outlet. It's very rocky and very shallow there now.
Why have the beavers given up?
Well, it might have been discouragement. You know, their process of damming up kept getting broken up, and you know they still have a lodge, maybe the 150 yards from that outlet area, but they haven't been back working this year, which has been
Interesting.
a good sign.
Because I hear they don't give up easily, that it's in their nature. When they think that their dams are in danger, they quickly get to work. That's what I was told.
Well,
Maybe they've gone away.
a lot of human activity there has just discouraged them.
Rich?
Yeah.
Do you know if there was any trapping in Kendall Brook?
I haven't heard of any. No, haven't. And the beavers were coming from the pond, as far as I know, the lake, not from below. Can you tell me? I didn't keep notes, Tony, on my my update on Pitcher Pond News. Was there anything else there that I didn't mention that you could see?
The loon nest was constructed.
Oh, yeah,
but,
okay.
Camouflaged.
Yeah, I'll just quickly say, a loon nest was constructed. I think I mentioned this to people to see if we could try to get a hatching and a baby loon. It's been a while on the lake. And when it was first put in, it was so exposed that I couldn't see that happening even if we were lucky. But since it's been put next to what's called Loon Island, because the loons nest there every year, the grasses have grown up around it enough that it's really getting camouflaged. So there's more of a hope it might do something in the future. That was my only comment about it.
Is that something that needs to be taken out in the wintertime? Or can it be left in place?
I think it's anchored quite well, so I don't think it's coming out from what I heard.
Right.
Yeah.
So the camouflage will stay, or
Yeah, hopefully. It should.
Susan?
Well, I had a couple of stories to add to the Pitcher Pond report that I heard that took place last week. A couple of incidents, one involving loons. A summer resident there said that there were two loons that were attacking each other, and one finally went down and didn't come back up. And then the other loon circled that spot for the rest of the day. And then the other incident involved a chipmunk that was at the edge of the shore, and a wide-mouthed bass came up and swallowed it. This was observed.
Must have had a wide mouth.
I guess they have big mouths. I didn't know they had those kind of appetites. But those were two things that were observed by a summer resident.
Carnivorous fish.
Interesting.
Who knew that they ate chipmunks?
Just
Well,
for
my brother-
anecdotal loon stories on Hobbs Pond, there was a fight between a bald eagle and a loon that was harassing the loon, and this was the pair that had the older chicks. And the loon fended it off, and the eagle went
good.
away. But it was,
Good.
I guess they were going at it. I didn't see it personally.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's good news.
Just another aside on largemouth bass. That fly fishermen have lures that are meant to mimic things like shrews and mice. But a chipmunk is a pretty good sized critter.
Well, so's a mouse.
So they do commonly eat small swimming mammals or whatever.
Well, my brother was up fishing Pitcher Pond a week ago, and yeah, he caught a couple bass, largemouth bass over 5 pounds. So they're in there.
Wow, that's big.
Yeah.
Shall we move on to Norton and McGuntacook,
Sure.
Susan?
So the water is quite low for this time of year, about as low as I've seen it. There are reports of lots of loons calling at night, quite a few scullers, and fewer motorboats. And I have noticed there's been no water test reports on the McGuntacook.org site since 7/27. So I haven't heard, I tried to keep looking for that bacteria count, but there haven't been no postings of water tests.
Are you still doing the testing?
I'm still doing it, and I'll do the last one in the middle of September.
Okay, so there won't be one tomorrow, or is there one today?
Well, usually we test on Wednesday, and the report is supposed to appear on the website on Friday, but it just hasn't been appearing.
And you don't know what the results were.
So I don't know what the results were.
Got it. You learned from this website.
Yeah, that's my only source of evaluation. They'll tell me.
Yeah.
So maybe it's worth inquiring.
Right. And will you be doing testing tomorrow on Wednesday?
Not me.
Okay, someone else will.
Someone else.
Yeah, I was thinking that this particular Wednesday might be a good one to really pay attention to, because if on Wednesday they do get an elevated value, when they retest on Friday, it might be a day that we want to go up the tributary there.
After all the rain.
After, yeah, I think I checked a rain gauge online for McGuntacook, and it was about 1.8 inches of rain over the last 24 hours or so. So that would set things up for potentially high levels.
I think if anything is, I'm not sure exactly how this is all reported. I know Killoran contacted me when there were high elevated levels at Shirttail, and Aaron went back out and tested. So
Okay.
that was because I tested
Mhm.
that day. So other than that, I don't know how they get reported.
Where do you test?
There's seven sites
Around McGonagall?
all around the
Okay.
Gordon and the Drake's Corner culvert.
So who would you think would be the best person to contact who would know the values? Would it be
I would say
Aaron?
Aaron,
Okay,
yeah. Evidently, they report to him, or he hears it one way or the other, if the count is high.
yeah. And Paul said that if we did experience elevated values, he might like to be involved again in the testing. So
Okay, great.
I don't know if Paul is hearing on a regular basis from Aaron about testing levels or not.
Maybe he sees them on
Hard
the
to say.
website.
Yeah.
And I can report for Levenseller, the water level is low, although I haven't checked it today. It might be up a bit higher. There's a pair of adult loons and 2 loon chicks that are now the size of the adults. And they're at the point where they can dive on their own. I don't think that they can fly on their own yet, but it's been good to see. And the adults have been good parents, bringing them fish very, very regularly. So it's good to see because they haven't had a successful year actually raising the chicks for about 3 years. So this is a good thing.
Yeah, nice.
And the pond gets used a lot by swimmers because it's just so close to 173 there, and they can pull off and swim for a while. And it seems to be in better shape along the parking lots. Sometimes there are lots of discarded diapers and that kind of thing. So I think that once kids go in wearing diapers, they just get so bloated and soggy that people don't necessarily even have a way of taking them away. But it's really a private site. You know, it's owned by one of the landowners at the end, so there really aren't provisions, I don't think, for being able to have waste disposal there. But most people seem to be pretty good.
Don't want waste disposal,
Yeah.
because then people can fill it
Well,
up and
exactly.
start to deal with it.
Right, right. So,
I met the couple that own the beach store, live on Levenseller, in that cabin that's at the head of the bottom of the lake. where
yes.
The outlet is, and they might consider having one or the other. I mean, the woman was very nice on this committee. If you'd like a representative from Levenseller, it's just something for everybody to
Sure,
consider, but it's
sure.
really nice.
Yeah, I know Matt, and is it Victoria? Is that her
can't
name?
remember.
Yeah, I think it's something like that. They don't live too far from where we live, and yeah, that's something it would be good. I think that we could actually use more people on the committee, and I'd really like to be able to recruit some younger folks than
And she's young.
all of us.
She's young.
And, so if you know of others who you think have an interest in this kind of thing, or that you might meet in your day-to-day travels on the lakes and ponds, it would be good to have some young, fresh blood on the committee.
What are you implying, Gary? It's okay.
I'm implying that we're all in this together.
Harry, what happened to Heather? Is she Heather Hurst?
Evidently, Heather didn't submit her application to become a committee member.
Okay.
Others that submitted partial interest forms that weren't at the meeting, the Stebbins.
Oh, I hadn't heard that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they didn't appear at the meeting, and they haven't completed the form completely, and so they sent it back to them, or they're waiting for them to complete their form. So there's a couple named Stebbins.
Okay, and that's for lakes and ponds. Okay. And,
I didn't get if they had that correct.
Are they on the pond?
I don't know them.
Susan, I didn't hear, I couldn't understand a word that you just did.
I was just saying that one of
Oh,
the.
that's much clearer.
Is that better?
Yes.
Yes.
Much better.
Okay, I was just saying, at one of the recent select board meetings, there was an interest form that was submitted by a couple with the last name of Stebbins, but they did not appear to be interviewed, and there was more information needed, so they were sending it back to them or waiting for them to complete the form.
For lakes and ponds?
Well, unless, if they had that, if they had not made a mistake on that form, that was what it said.
Okay.
And Tony, a question for you. Have you heard back yet from David that he finally received your application to become a member?
Do you hear?
I couldn't understand a
It's
word.
for you.
Well,
Okay, so Tony, the question was, have you heard back from David Kinney that he's received your request to be a member? I know you've sent it through several times, but I wonder if he's confirmed receipt of your email.
So can I repeat what you've said? Because Tony
Yes.
can get and see if I can understand what you've said. That David Kinney sent Tony applications to be on the Lakes and Ponds?
yes,
Committee?
I responded to that a month ago.
Yes, so I might
You
say
responded to that, right? Yes.
that your name was mentioned at the select board meeting, Tony, that they had received your form, and they were wondering if you were going to appear, but I think it was just a matter of reappointing you. I don't think you needed to appear. So it would, I think
David was pretty clear about the fact that I didn't, responding, because I'd already been a member for several decades, he thought it was unnecessary for me to appear, and that my response by email to him was sufficient.
well, yes, but I think you still need to come in and sign the form in front of the clerk. They're very casual about that. There's a whole pile of papers in there. So anytime you come into the town office, you can just ask for that and sign it.
I've not done that, and I will.
Yeah, and I think that everyone who's been attending just by Zoom will need to do that because we did circulate the forms at the last meeting for the people who were here. And so, Lisa, you weren't here then. You might, next time you come down to the town office, ask to be able to sign your form as a member.
Oh, okay.
You can just go in.
The comprehensive plan, I guess.
You did, I gave you that. You signed it.
For comprehensive.
Right.
Yeah.
Did you bring it in here?
I already
Okay.
know that that's been done.
Okay.
But of course, I would have to do it for the year.
You might have to come in and ask for it. Yeah.
Gary, does that mean that Rich and myself and Tony have to go and sign?
Yes, you need to do that. I don't think you need to make a special trip to do it, but I think they'd like to see it happen sooner rather than later.
Okay.
Yeah, I did that.
Okay,
Tony,
great.
just ask,
Tony and me.
do we all serve 1-year terms? Are these just 1-year terms?
These are just one-year terms.
Oh, so we have
Yes.
to do this every year.
Every year.
Okay.
Thank you. I wouldn't have done it if you hadn't mentioned it.
So as far as other agenda items go, we've got 3 things that we want to talk about. One is just a quick update on Phragmites and talking about any future work that we may want to do. We also want to talk about the results of the survey of the docks and floats. And we also want to go over the comprehensive plan, and Lisa's going to be leading that session. I think we can cover the Phragmites pretty quickly. We had another work day the day after our meeting in July, and Jay and I were there, and I think that we did a pretty good job of cutting everything back that we could see, with Jay using his weed whacker, and I used some clippers. I went down there today to take a look at things, and it looks as though most of the Phragmites has grown back to somewhere between 1 foot and 2 feet high, but none of it has gotten to the point where it's going to seed. So I think it's going to probably require another trip out there sometime in the next couple of weeks to take it back down to the ground with a combination of Jay doing the weed whacking, if he's available to do that, and any others who might want to go after what can be cut by hand on the slope and around the fringes and along the nature trail itself. One of the things that Jay did when he was out there is he cleared a path for the opening of the nature trail. So you can actually see it as a trail now and actually get at the additional phragmites that needs to be cut. Susan, you were there too, as well, right? Right.
Yeah, there was a crew there, I think. Dave Ray came and participated.
That's true. Yeah, Mike Ray was there.
Yeah, Mike Ray, excuse me, not Dave. And there was a
Jim Pierce,
Jim
a
Pierce.
volunteer,
Right.
yeah.
A shore owner from
Yes.
down the other side of
Nice.
the gazebo there.
Yeah.
And Tony and I were there too.
That boy, my memory is. That's why we need to get younger blood.
Mary, can I ask a question?
Sure.
The literature that we studied initially last year had said that the best time to cut was early August, when the the pieces had reached a certain level. And I'm wondering, we cut a lot earlier, and because there was some reference that it might stimulate growth by cutting early. Now, this has been an unusual year and things didn't grow very much. But I'm wondering if you noticed that happening this time and whether it's a good idea to continue to work in June on this when some wisdom at least says, wait.
Right. And, that was what we were talking about, the differences between the Maine protocol from the DEP and the Connecticut protocol. And we originally followed the Connecticut protocol with one cut either at the end of July or very early August, but then we followed up with additional cuttings. We started earlier this year, and part of the idea was to be able to cut it more easily, but also at the same time try to preserve some of the native plants so that maybe they would begin to take over in some way. I was really contemplating that question today when I looked at it, because they say that things can become more dense if you cut more often and earlier. And I'd be interested in other people's observations when you go down there and see
Okay,
if you
maybe we
think
should
it's
all
much
take a look at it and
different. Yeah, just take a look
discuss it
at
next
it
time.
and see what you think about the density of the plants that are coming up.
I thought in general that this year, the infiltration of native plants was much better. I thought we're giving them perhaps a better chance by knocking the Phragmites back repeatedly, because in the end, that's going to be the winning formula there.
Yeah.
Is that something replaces the Phragmites.
The first year we cut 3 years ago, I don't remember seeing any native plants.
Right.
I mean, it was just a pile of dead reeds.
Right. Yeah.
So it was encouraging to see them coming up. So that's what we were trying to do, clear it out, give them a chance.
Yeah, and to my mind, that seems to be looking to be a successful formula, or at least a better formula.
I think the other thing that we have on our side with that newer approach is that the spread of the Phragmites is actually bounded to some degree. So in other words, it's not going to grow up into the parking lot, and it's not going to grow into the deep woods because it's too dark. And it's already gone all the way up the hill to the back of the Veterans Memorial. So we may not have to worry about spread, but I was wondering about the density, maybe something that's different.
Well, when it comes to the whacker, I don't care how dense it is. It's the same area.
Yeah, right.
So if I'm killing 5 plants at a time or 12 plants at a time, it's sort of.
Except that the more dense it is and becomes, the less you're eradicating it.
Yeah.
let's have a look and talk about it next time.
Yeah, good.
So maybe the best way to handle it is not necessarily to come up with a specific workday, but if any of us are going to go out, or if Jay is able to go out, he could just send us a quick email, and if others can join at that same time, or if we're going to be going out and we'd like to have some company, we could just send a message.
Yeah.
Because I think we'll be able to handle it in that way.
I've been taking photographs and I can continue to take some as well. So we have the dates on them as well.
Good.
That's helpful.
And we are going to need to reapply for our permit with the state, and at that time, we're going to have to document what we've done, what it looked like before we started, and what
Let
it
me
looked
know
like
when you want me
we
to
finished.
put those together.
Yeah. Well, shall we move on to the comprehensive plan
How about
topic?
the foam, the docks? Do you want to talk about the encapsulated
I do
foams?
want to talk about that. What should we talk about first? Do you have a preference?
Well, maybe it wouldn't, well,
Talks are quicker. Let's do
no,
that.
let's do the docks out of the way. But I have something I want to bring to your attention about that. So.
And just let me mention too that I got an email from Dave Kinney
You did.
today relative to the meeting last
Yes,
night.
okay.
And he said somebody from the Lakes and Ponds Committee spoke up at the meeting.
Yeah.
And I'll turn to you.
Yes, I did. So do we want to talk about the survey first?
Why don't you talk about what happened?
So-
Because the survey piece will relate to that.
Okay, so I got the results from Dale Doherty about McGuntacook and Norton. And I don't have the 20 or 21 survey, but there are still 11 unencapsulated foam docks or floats in McGuntacook and 16 in Norton. That's 27 in the Lincolnville area.
Just in the Lincoln.
Just in the Lincolnville area.
Excuse me, Susan, 11 unencapsulated in McGonagall, and how many in?
16 in Norton and 11 in McGuntacook.
Okay, thank you.
That's down from 3 years ago. There were 20 in McGuntacook. It's down to 11. Norton was 31. That's cut in half to 16. That's improvement. However, there's still 27 docks or floats with unencapsulated foam. So I happened to be at the select board meeting last night, and they were entertaining the contract with Lake City Docks for the storage of floats on town property at Breezemere Park, the area we've been treating. And I happen to have a photograph, but when I was there on June 2nd, first of all, we noticed that there were a number of blue styrofoam floats that had been stored there over the winter. And I took a photo of the particles, some of the particles I saw that were there. So I thought, well, this is a good chance to inquire why we're storing these things on town property when the Camden has already issued an ordinance and they've gone through the whole how many year cycle until now. It's completely illegal and fines are being applied for blue styrofoam. And I pointed out that here in Lincolnville, we had gone to for the educational approach, and there had been some results, but we still have 27 blue foam docks or floats in the Lincolnville, McGuntacook, and Norton. And wouldn't it be nice if the town asked the company that stored them to not put blue foam on town property? You know, how hard would that be? So the company wasn't there due to illness, so some wanted to push it through. Some asked to wait until they could hear a formal letter from Lakes and Ponds, and it turns out that the company that actually had requested a delay anyway in the signing of the contract until they could be there to represent it. So that's going to be 3 weeks from now because we're talking about Labor Day weekend. So that next meeting of the select board is September 12th. So my question to the Lakes and Ponds Committee is, do we want to write a letter to the select board or David Kinney, whoever the appropriate person is, and say, in the interest of the comprehensive plan, water resources goal number 1, we would like to recommend opportunities to enhance lake quality by asking any company that stores docks on town property to not store blue styrofoam.
Great idea.
Yes, excellent.
Absolutely.
Complete vote here.
And that was implementation strategy that was assigned to the Lakes and Ponds Committee. So I really, it wasn't my place to represent the Lakes and Ponds Committee last night. I was just speaking as a member of the committee, but I said we had discussed this, and it was a wondering question.
Except though that you have to wonder what they would do with those docks if they didn't store them on town property. Would they tell the person or who owns the dock no, and therefore the dock stays in the water and disintegrates?
That is the question. And if somebody is already out of state and in September, they may not have the wherewithal to come back and haul it back up on their own shore. That is a question I would like to ask the company. Is this the only place that you store?
Yeah, if they could be, if we could be assured that they would find a spot for it and not leave it in the lake.
Yeah, why should the town be responsible for providing space for private docks on town property for this stuff? So, but maybe it's an inconvenience this year, but we could at least begin the process of saying next year, or I really want to ask the company, do you have any conversations with the dock owners about their, about upgrading, because you're leaving particles behind on town property?
Yeah, I think that there is an issue for the people who have such docks now and had the expectation that they would be stored in terms of something that we might want to phase in.
Right.
Because otherwise, it's a real slam to the company and right. So it may be
too
late,
late,
but I think that we really need to move in that direction. I got an email from Dave Kinney today, and let me just read that to you. It gets into some of this in terms of what he thought the follow-up
Okay.
would be for us. He said, earlier this evening, the Board of Selectmen were to consider a land lease with Lake City Floats that would allow for storage of floats in the overflow parking at Breezemere Park. A member of the Lakes and Ponds Committee, as well as the Comprehensive Plan Review Committee, Susan Severio, happened to be in attendance at the meeting for another purpose. Susan suggested that perhaps it was in the town's best interest to amend the lease so that only floats with encapsulated flotation be allowed to be stored on the leased land. As a representative of the Lake City Floats was unable to attend tonight's meeting due to a health-related issue, and that Lake City had requested that the item be tabled to the next meeting, after discussing the matter somewhat, the board took no action, in effect tabling the matter. The board did inquire as to whether or not the Lakes and Ponds Committee had an update on the success of the education and outreach program and/or had a recommendation for a different course of action with regard to floats. It says, I've likely done a poor job of explaining the discussions, so if you have an opportunity to watch the meeting, or at least this portion of it, that would be wonderful. The discussion starts at about the 3-minute, 30-second mark on the recording, and he gives me the link to see it. And he goes on to say, I'll be out of the office for the next several days. We should touch base at some point next week. So what I can do at that point is talk to David, give him the update that he was looking for in terms of the success of the education efforts so far. And I did some calculations on that, comparing our first year, which was 2018 versus this year. And For McGuntacook, there were 25 in 2018 and 11 this year, with a reduction of 56%, which is actually pretty significant. But there still are 11 there. And on Norton Pond, they started out with 45 actually in 2018, and they're now down to 16, which is a 64% reduction, which is greater than McGuntacook. So we can say that we've made forward progress with our efforts. The educational effort has paid off, but
It's still there.
but the rate of reduction is
Right,
reducing.
it's not linear, it's
We're kind of at the hardcore
Yes, it's hard.
now. and
asymptotic.
So, and one of the things I thought I might say, and I wanted to see what you think of this, is that doing some kind of a regulatory action, doing an ordinance on the part of the town is really a big deal.
It is a big
The
deal.
select board has to get behind it. There are all kinds of public hearings and meetings, and it can cause a lot of ill will in town.
Pointed out it was cumbersome, costly, and unpopular.
Right. So this is a potential measure that could be used that would deal with the residual in Norton Pond that wouldn't require the adoption of an ordinance. It would merely be the execution of a contract with some limitations. And I think that if it could be structured in such a way that it wasn't going to create a horrendous problem for either lakefront owners or for the company, that could be a direction that we moved. To put people on notice that, a year out, 2 years out, whatever the select board thinks is workable, there would be an end to the practice. So that's one way of approaching it. And I'd be interested in hearing other thoughts. And I could share a range of things with David when we speak with him.
I originally sort of suggested this as an out, but I think we should find out, and I think we probably need talk with Lake City Floats, like what's going to happen to those if they're banned from the current location? Is it going to end up with a worse situation? Do they have an alternative storage location? I mean, it may be that the best thing we can do is put them all right there in that one place where, even though you get the debris, it's right there localized and maybe
Well, they could be
cleaned up.
wrapped, they could be wrapped.
It could be wrapped up, there could be some cleanup process, but until we fully understand what we wish for, and make sure that we're not making the problem worse.
Exactly, and the select board is very aware of that, and so that is an important question to ask them. Do you have other sites where you store these? They do store a lot of them, most of them, I would say, down at Bog Bridge. Now, I'm curious to know, now that Camden has that ordinance in full effect, are they allowed to store from down there, or are we now the dumping grounds,
Right.
you see?
Because they didn't used to be stored in Breezemere, did they? Isn't this a fairly recent phenomenon?
Yes, just the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, about the
I
time
think,
the
yeah.
ordinance went into effect.
And if you remember, there was a rumor last year that they were bringing blue foam unencapsulated polystyrene docks from McGuntacook into Norton, but we looked into that and we were assured that they were only coming from Norton. So that would be something else to talk to the company about. That we don't want to be, like you say, have Lincolnville become the dumping ground.
But I think we should also be careful that 33 floats, or however many unencapsulated floats there are, they can do a lot of damage to the lakes over the next 5 to 10 years, or whatever their lifetime is. And that maybe it's not a good idea to not consider copying Camden's ordinance or something similar for the health of the lake, because they do create a mess.
And before we do that, I mean, it may be called for, but to continue, I wonder if we could continue the educational process. Let's say, they say, we decide for whatever reason, everyone's inconvenience and lack of alternatives, they decide to keep storing them at Breezemere. Would Lake City Floats cooperate with Lakes and Ponds Committee by at least passing out our pamphlets to anyone who still has the blue phone? You know, as, you know, by the way, did you know that there's a real concern about this in our town?
It would be nice to think that we could get Lake City Floats really on our side as part of policing the problem, because you know, they're an actor involved in it, and it's going to reflect on them and be a pain for them as well. So,
Right.
Is there any
Congress
way-
is to work with them.
What bothers me a little bit is that when we first addressed this issue and chose education over regulation, it was out of a concern for the expense of people, of camp owners who would be forced to upgrade. And that seems to make a lot of sense. If you are a camp owner and you are suddenly required to upgrade your float to the tune of $1,000, $3,000, that's a critical expense. In this instance, it seems to me that we're not addressing the expenses for a company that is making money. And I think we can be a lot less charitable towards them.
Yeah, depending on what the options are of the float owners. So in other words, while it will have consequences for the private company, it would also end up having consequences that might lead to expenses for homeowners, which is why I think we need to,
Investigate.
yeah,
right.
look at this, and I really like what I'm hearing from everyone here. I think that this is a really good, thoughtful discussion. If we can get people on our side, if we can make it an educational thing, recognize that we've made progress, and you know,
They've had 4
this
years
is-
to save their money.
it's, you know, so for the betterment of the community and the health of the pond.
And it may be an opportunity for Lake City Floats if they say, look, we'll store your encapsulated float here in Lincolnville. We have a nice easy place to put it. Your unencapsulated ones, we have to wrap in plastic and we have to take them off site, and it's going to cost you X number more dollars. Then that's an incentive for people to switch.
I think we should consider in the letter that there's no expansion of taking on any others from outside the town, just to prevent an increase, because it is likely that they might get business from Camden now to be bringing docks out this way. And maybe we should at least think about requesting that there's a cap on how many docks are to be located at Norton.
Well, I don't know, I took a casual survey of the ones that were stored at Breezemere. There were not 27 blue foam docks. There was maybe a small handful. It wasn't that many. So I'm guessing the rest of them are hauled up on shore.
But they're not allowed to be in Camden, so they can't be coming from Camden because they're not allowed to be in the waters there.
Yeah, so these are only from Norton, so there'd be a population of 16 of them.
Yeah.
So that there was maybe 25% of those or something like that were here. The others are probably, you know, on the properties of the homeowners.
Can that be requested of the company, that it's only from Norton that are stored there?
I think that is the case now, but that could be a stipulation on the contract.
I would hope.
Yeah.
And Carrie, what about the 11 that are in McGuntacook? Do they get stored on Bog Bridge?
Good question.
I don't think we know, you know.
We should ask that.
Yeah, that would be a good question. That would be a good question too. So I think that rather than deal with this with a letter at this point, I can sort of present this conversation. I can talk to David next week, see if he would like to have a letter from us, or I could refer him to this recorded session. You know, he could.
Oh, good idea.
Hear what we've had to say.
It would be nice to find out where Lake City Floats stores. How many do they store where?
Yes,
Where else do they store?
Right.
I think it's important to keep in mind that, at least in my own mind, we are advocates for the health of the pond, not advocates for the financial well-being of pond residents.
I agree.
That's our primary responsibility, but I think it's really important for us to take into account other kinds of issues. You know, if we want to be an effective and trusted organization, I think that those are the kinds of things that we also need to take into consideration. But
And to be seen to be taking them into consideration too.
no, exactly. But also, as Jay was saying, and as others have said as well, there could be environmental consequences if we don't. You know, if we do, you know, shut people off from being able to avail themselves to the service of bringing it.
I think it needs to be a conversation.
Yeah.
We need more info.
And those questions need to be asked of Lake City, and so those questions were not being asked by the select board. So I think it's our place as Lakes and Ponds Committee and the Comprehensive Plan Committee to ask those questions. What is the impact? What are the options? Are there any alternatives? What is your plan for addressing this situation?
Yeah, and are there ways that the town or the committee can work with you?
Right. Because certainly it's in Lake City Float's best interest, because if they're moving those and they're dragging or shredding that stuff, then they, you know, all of a sudden they're responsible.
So Susan, did you get any feedback from the select board that they recalled? Did any of them talk about the knowledge of what we were looking at in terms of possible ordinance with the unencapsulated, or did it seem like brand new news to them?
I read their notes that they had in front of them, that David prepares for them. And the only other consideration was parking for the enter event of the lawnmower race. So that wasn't even brought up in the meeting.
Okay.
There was no mention of foam or anything that was left behind or put back in the pond.
I got the sense, though, from David's email to me, though, that he was wanting to know how the education effort was paying off. Because every time that I've come back to speak to the select board over the last several years, I've talked about that. You know, we had a choice, we took the education method, we're going to have to continue to look at this. If we're unable to make continuing progress, we may have to consider an ordinance. So I know that that's in David's mind. I don't know if it's in the
Okay.
mind of all of the select board members.
What I remember hearing is they said, well, Gary was here, he said everything was going well, you know, they were making progress. That was all they needed to hear.
Mhm.
So I was the thorn in their side, reminding them we still had 27 floats, and we're now 4 years into this or so. So it wasn't, it definitely wasn't on their, doesn't seem to be on their radar
Okay.
as an issue.
That's good to know, yeah. Well, I think this will have to be an item for our next meeting as well, and we can also take on the issue of where do we want to go more globally with this for the other ponds, and are there ways that we'd want to step up the education efforts, or do we want to give consideration to a regulatory approach? Rich, at the last meeting, you mentioned that at the Pitcher Pond meeting, there was a vote in favor of making a recommendation that there be some kind of an ordinance to deal with it. And I was wondering if you had any different thoughts, given the results of your survey this year. And as I look at Pitcher Pond, you had 10 in 2018, and it's down to 3 at this point, with 2 floats and 1 dock. If I
Yeah,
remember.
two docks and 1 float, yeah.
2 docks and 1 float. Okay.
Yeah, so, yeah, I'm thinking, between how this is brought up at all our association meetings, the articles in our newsletter every year, it has made a difference. And I'm not thinking that it's so urgent, because people are discussing it more and they're making changes. There was a concern about what are we going to do with Northport if we were to make an ordinance for the Lincolnville side, because we have the other side in a different town. But at this point, there are no floats or docks on the Northport side that have any unencapsulated. Now, there are much fewer camps on that side, but still, that shouldn't be an issue for us at this point if we were to move ahead with that. But I guess I'm not feeling such an urgency to put an ordinance into effect. The other side of the coin, however, is in the future, I don't know. I don't know if unencapsulated will become the standard. It seems like that's being recommended more often now. It's less likely that people are going to be buying the blue styrofoam.
I'm not even sure you can buy it.
What's that?
Yeah, I'm not even sure you can buy the unencapsulated anymore. If you go by any marina, anything they have there for sale is all encapsulated.
That's what I'm hearing. So, I mean, outside of that issue about preventing it in the future, which may not be an issue as much, there isn't that kind of urgency at Pitcher Pond.
Yeah. Maybe one thing that we could pursue is to do it how Camden had 2 parts to theirs. The first part was that immediately upon adoption of their ordinance, no one was allowed to bring in new unencapsulated styrofoam, either a new dock or a replacement dock. But in terms of existing unencapsulated polystyrene, there was a 5-year period to get rid of it, and that's coming up now. So maybe it would be a safeguard to have something that said, no replacement in kind,
Yeah.
or
Because there might be
nothing
some
new,
for sale.
which might go over better. So those are options that we can.
That would be a good option. That would be a good option to look at, would be to maybe try to put something like that in place. I think it'd be a lot less controversial. It wouldn't step on too many toes, and it would be a first step.
And we can talk about that at more length at the next meeting. But this was a really good discussion, and I'll report back on.
I think someone should be at that next select board meeting to have this conversation with Lake City Floats. If the
And
select board doesn't answer.
I'm not sure whether all the nuances that we discussed here means that it's an appropriate discussion to have at the select board meeting. I'm wondering if there could be a preliminary meeting between David and Lake City Floats and representatives from our committee to just frame the issue, and then at least at the select board meeting, people might have positions or offer solutions to a known problem.
Okay, I'll talk to David about that too, see if he'd like to do that, and see if he'd like to have somebody from the committee Is there anybody from the committee who would be interested in participating in a session like that?
Susan seems very logical.
Um,
I mean, I could represent the comprehensive plan. So, yeah.
True, yeah. Is there a Norton Pond Camp Owners Association?
It's part of the McClintock Watershed Association. It covers both McClintock and Norton.
So do they have an annual meeting of,
They did, I guess it was about 4 or 5 weeks ago.
But it's
July,
not
beginning of
Norton
July.
specific, it's both.
it's both, right?
It's both.
Okay.
But another thing to
It's
consider
everyone, all of the watershed, it's all watershed.
might also be to eventually possibly have conversations with the people who own the unencapsulated floats and to find out what's holding them back, and instead of simply assuming that they're all, either stiff-necked or something. I mean, maybe it's worth having a couple of conversations and see how they go. Anyway, just throwing that out.
Or at least
That
have
helped.
it's available. for everybody.
That helped at Pitcher Pond, people talking to others about making a change. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I was
It's
sort of
more
asking about the
easy.
association, whether there was peer pressure that could be applied.
Right.
Mhm.
But
Yeah, look what I did, and, my float's great, and maybe you should be considering it, or something. But, I mean, maybe some of us should make or we should be more specific and find somebody specifically from Norton to speak with people at Norton. Anyway.
It worked in
To be
Moody
considered.
Pond, right?
It's in microcosm.
We better move on.
Yeah, we need to move on, it's getting late.
Okay, well, we
Before
may
we-
not- we're
Before we
obviously
move
not
on,
gonna
could
get-
I make a request? Susan, could you send me a very abridged version of what
Went on.
what you reported to your comment to the select board? Because I think that starts this whole conversation, and I'd like to get some of that.
Would David Kinney's letter be appropriate to include?
I don't think that'd be appropriate to include in our minutes, but I think that we can just handle it by saying, we had a discussion of, the issue of the contract and also progress on, just something that's very general that doesn't get into details.
No.
I think would work.
That's all it needs to be said.
Jay, did you have a copy of what I sent out?
I did.
You did.
I
did
do.
You got it there?
I don't know
Okay,
if
I'm
it's-
gonna give you one.
Oh, I think I have an extra. Oh, you have one?
Okay, I just brought extras just in case.
Okay.
Did you hear it, Tony?
I got about 10% of what everybody's saying.
Okay, I thought I would read the ones that have just a dot in front of them. The ones that got checked were
Hey,
discussed in.
wait.
Can anyone hear me?
Can you wait a minute? Because we need for the minutes. Gary, could you please send to Tony? He couldn't understand what was said.
Okay,
Should go in the minutes.
you want to put together a couple sentences? So Susan will put together just a couple of sentences identifying the topic, say that we had a discussion.
Oh, I heard that. I heard that. I'll do that. It will be,
Okay, so that you don't need anything from Susan?
no.
Okay, great.
I mean, and we can correct the minutes next month.
Good, right, and, and I guess you could say that I would be following up with David Kinney following this meeting.
Yes.
Right. So I'll just keep it very brief.
Yes.
Okay, Lise, we're under.
Okay. I thought I would read each individual item, the ones with only a dot in front of them. The ones with a dot and a check were discussed in September 2021. And maybe at some subsequent point, we could go over them. But
This
initially,
isn't gonna work, Lise. You're garbled too much. I don't know what you could do with your mic, but we can't understand you.
How's this?
No, worse.
No, back up.
You don't have to use volume, just
Back up, Marlies, if you
Okay,
can.
how's this? Can you hear me now?
Can you back up a little?
How's that?
That might work better.
Oh, interesting. Okay, well, I'll move the mic further away. Okay, I was going to read. Yeah,
Oh, Ted.
No, that's not gonna do it either. I'm sorry.
close, yeah, right directly into it.
Push the button.
Could you switch with her? Your mic seems to be working really well.
Okay, sure.
Well, the topic is.
Here, this
implementation
What?
stages.
comprehensive plan.
So does this one work any better with me at it? Apparently not.
Oh, God.
Testing.
Okay, how is this? Can you hear me now?
I can't.
Yes? No?
It's difficult, but let's get started and see.
Okay. Develop, we're going to do the ones with the dots. Just the dots, the ones with check were discussed in September of 2021. And hopefully at some later point, we can review them too. So the first one, I wanted just to get initial opinions. I went over all of these with Dave Kinney, and I will report to you on what he said. So the first one is develop appropriate performance standards for construction adjacent to Lincolnville's lakes and ponds, such as septic systems to be designed at a greater than minimum design factor. Dave Kinney said that the town has standards, but that none of the standards are greater than the state standards, state mandates. Does anybody have any thoughts about that, whether any
Is this,
performance standards should be specifically created for Lincolnville, or whether we should just go with what's been happening for the past 20 years?
is this something that towns normally do?
I think towns will sometimes do something like this if they have a significant problem with either algae blooms in particular or elevated bacterial levels that they can't identify very specific causes for. But I think it's the exception rather than the rule to go beyond the state minimum.
Okay, so we'll just, status quo, that's what most people think right now, not to develop specific performance standards for construction.
We don't have a problem that we have identified, a significant problem we've identified that would justify that.
Well, is there a way to request that if there is a bacterial problem, the code enforcement officer will do an inspection, or will call for an inspection of the septic field in the proximity of the problem in the lake? Is that a possibility?
You know, we know that's been a past practice
Right?
on Martin Pond, you know, with the Sawyer property. And there was a lot of testing that was done and action was taken with respect to that.
Yeah, but that took years, Gary. If
Okay.
it's written, it would seem to me that it would make it clear for a request to have a septic area examined. Right now, it's probably, I don't know, Norton Pond, I remember for years, I don't know if Tony and Whitney remember
Yes,
about the problems there at Norton Pond and how long it took to identify and then remediate that one place. But that discussion went on for a few years that I remember it. It was like nobody jumped on it.
Mhm.
Yes,
And it is the main contributor to bacterial problems. So it would seem like if we're going to do something with the comprehensive plan to make recommendations, that's probably the best place to start. That's my opinion.
So if a problem emerges, appropriate steps should be taken, kind of thing. It should be the retesting and
Yes.
examination, rather than develop specific performance standards for construction adjacent to the lakes and ponds. Okay,
And maybe specifically recommend a few of those steps. The code enforcement officer will get involved. There will be an evaluation of the septic systems in that area.
right. Evaluation of other septics too, nearby.
Good.
Okay. Next one, encourage frequent visits by the code enforcement officer to waterfront construction sites to assist contractors and owners in proper siting and erosion control measures. Now, according to Dave Kinney, that does happen and it's ongoing. So I think it's something that should stay in.
Certainly.
Yeah, I agree.
yes.
Okay. Next, encourage permanent erosion control measures on existing roads and driveways within 2 years. According to Dave Kinney, they're doing the best they can. The committees and the lake associations keep an eye on driveways. In other words, there are no permanent erosion control measures on existing roads and driveways.
Well, it's difficult because a lot of the lake roads are private, so that the town really is
But
not.
you could put measures in, but how about instead of encourage, just say consider,
Mhm.
and not say specifically who necessarily. I mean, we're gonna be going over these again. I mean, this is just an initial tackling of the language, but this is not the last time, unfortunately, you'll probably look at this. But I think maybe if you use the word consider, because it hasn't happened yet.
No, I think encourage is actually a stronger term than consider.
Okay,
Recommend.
So this would be an implementation strategy. And they're saying the implementation strategy would be for the town to be in a role of encouraging, and I think they look some to the Lakes and Ponds Committee.
well, how about not saying either encourage or consider, just have permanent erosion control measures? This was a concern on Pitcher Pond, was it not? Or did you mention all the current construction, Rich?
Say that again, construction picture?
Well, you mentioned in your report a lot of new construction on Pitcher Pond.
Yeah. Well, a lot of renovation, yeah.
Renovation is something that Pat has definitely mentioned in the past when she's been here about the cutting, and not as the cutting as well as the building and the, so if it's a problem anywhere, I think it might be a problem on Pitcher.
I don't think we want to necessarily get specific to lakes.
No, I'm just wondering, you know, is it an issue anywhere?
I think, and take out Board of Selectmen and CEO within 2 years. I mean, just say, if we don't eventually list who's going to do it, but just have it in there. Okay, next one. We'll be back at all of this. This is just to get an initial thought. Encourage the voluntary correction of malfunctioning septic systems on waterfront property through education and a town application to the Small Community Development Grant Program. Okay, well, that doesn't exist anymore, the Small Community Grant Program. David Kinney says that it should be required. The correction.
it shouldn't be voluntary.
Yeah, he's suggesting that it be require correction.
Yes,
That's good.
required.
Okay. Next one, continue, and again, I don't think, at least at this point, we shouldn't get into who's gonna do it, but continue to require developers to adhere to best management practices for erosion, sedimentation, and stormwater control through appropriate ordinances. Well, David Kinney simply said yes.
Really?
Yes,
Don't they have to anyway?
yes. But do we want to keep this in? Is the question that is before us now, and I think the answer is yes.
Yes.
It shows some priority
Right.
of the town comprehensive plan.
Okay, turn the page, please, to page 120. And in the middle of the page, under water resources, goal number 3, the middle one, ensure all ordinances follow state phosphorus guidelines. Now, according to Dave Kinney, the land use committee has water quality regulations.
There is no land use committee.
There is no land use committee. Wait. Where's Dave? All these notes here. No, that's what it says. Erosion control ordinances. Well, I'm sorry, then I will have to go back and find out what he meant, because that's obviously something that should stay in, right? Not sure what he meant. Continue to monitor phosphorus through the land use ordinances and commercial site plan review. That is not happening. And I think that we've been discussing the need for testing for phosphorus.
Well, that's, monitoring goes along with water monitoring and the different lakes and ponds.
Yeah, did you all monitor for phosphorus? You do, don't you?
Don't you, Rich?
Phosphorus, no.
Okay, well, I guess we should. I remember when,
We used to, we don't anymore. no.
yeah, when Rob Lovell used to do it, I think he said it was quite
It's very it's a complex, Process.
complicated, yes.
yes. No, I don't think any of us have been doing it for years.
Okay, so monitor phosphorus through the land use ordinances and commercial site plan review. Well, I'm not quite sure what the land use ordinances, I guess maybe that's what he meant. And the land use ordinances have water quality regulations. Anybody know? No.
You'd have to ask Jay.
I'll find out. Okay.
Lisa, let me bring something up about
Yeah.
shore development. I think you mentioned it a little earlier.
Yeah.
I'm not sure of this, but I think certain construction companies, if they're doing waterfront development, have to have some certification in knowing the mitigation efforts that need to be made.
You mean state regs?
Well, I think they need a particular certification in some cases, and I'm wondering if we should look into a stipulation like that around shorefront development. Something to maybe inquire about.
Yeah, I think
Well,
that
there
that's,
were a lot of mentions along here of other things to do with shorefront development, like the driveways and the septic systems.
Does anyone know whether, if there's construction by the water, if there are certain certifications that a company needs to have to do that?
Well, the first thing that we looked at was develop appropriate performance standards for construction adjacent to the Lincolnville lakes and ponds, such as septic systems, etc. Now, according to David Kinney, none are greater than the state mandate. They do have,
Maybe sufficient.
they do have regs.
It will require, okay.
Rich, I think that that would be a good question for the CEO. And I believe that there are requirements for people who do that kind of work, like erosion control, and that's
Yeah, I've heard that.
phosphorus from coming in, but I don't know quite how it works. I think the CEO really plays a pretty large role in a lot of the things that we're talking about here.
Yeah. Well, maybe that's something that, Lise, you could check into.
Okay, but now what is the question? Because it's not just phosphorus, it's all sorts of things, right? Because in the first one that we looked at, it says performance standards for construction, such as septic systems to be designed at a greater than minimum design factor. And Dave Kinney said to that they do have standards, but none are greater than the state mandates.
I'm just wondering if the town is requiring companies that work at the shorefront properties for construction are requiring that people have certification in mitigation efforts that need to be done.
So it requires certification.
Yeah,
I think if you, Frank, it's time to have a talk with Frank Terrio.
Yeah.
He is the expert on this. He's been doing it for many years. He has reams of ordinances. He
Right,
has
I'm
to,
sure he does.
you know, so
Absolutely.
I'm not familiar with. So I think he's probably the one to talk to.
Yeah, I think at this point, the state standards are fairly rigorous, so the question is, do we need something in excess of those?
Well, that's just what Dave Kinney said. Yes.
He says we do need more?
No, he says we don't need more.
Right.
I mean, he actually didn't express an opinion. He said they go by the state mandates. That's all.
And I think the shoreland provisions were just updated about 5 years ago. So we
They're
had a
pretty
whole new
strict.
set, and that was required by the state.
Yeah.
And it loosened some things, but it tightened some things as well.
So what should I be finding out? What those requirements are? Is that what you'd like to know, Rich?
what the town's expectations are for a company that's doing that shorefront construction. And are they requiring certification of that company? Maybe the state has that law already.
Okay, well, I'll
I
find
know,
out.
for example, that, Frank is expecting that if somebody's doing some work along the shorefront, and they need to be doing like black plastic to stop runoff from creating a problem in the lake. But I just wonder what they're expecting from the companies in terms of the training of contractors who are working on the waterfront.
There's such a thing as a certification, too. We don't know.
Rich, that's very good. Like the loggers have to have certification. Otherwise, they cannot work on a property.
Right.
Okay, good. Okay, and then on the third page, develop a database of information on wells in the center that would assist in an analysis of hydrocarbon infiltration into the groundwater and to determine the extent, type, and location and source of pollution. That has not been done according to Dave Kinney, but that lots of data was collected a long time ago by the Department of Environmental Protection and the CEO, the code enforcement officer. But it was a long time ago.
No, I wasn't around here at the time, but I think that this was probably a pretty sensitive issue because of the Millington properties, both on Thurlow Road and down where we're working now. So, and I guess also the gas station, even at the general store, those kinds of things. I think that we're in a place now where that isn't as much of a concern because there's been so much remediation that's been done. I'm not sure that there's a requirement to do this at this point, but I can understand why it would have been put in when it was.
But not necessarily, I mean, we look at the area that we're working on the Phragmites, and that area is not necessarily got a clean bill of health.
But if they continue to monitor this, the state does.
Does the state continue to monitor? And does it monitor the wells that,
Well, they're monitoring, they do have wells that are monitoring wells that are there. Those are those white plastic pipes that we see.
see, I don't know in the case right here, whether it's the monitoring wells that the, the database of information is supposed to be. I should find out from perhaps the CEO. Because actually, when you said that, it could be the monitoring wells, and it might be, you know, ordinary domestic wells.
I think they're talking about domestic wells in the center that weren't that far away from the sources of contamination.
That's what I thought.
And I think that that's been dealt with. And if it's been dealt with by removing the tanks, by doing other kinds of remediation, it probably isn't a continuing concern for the center.
Now, who would make a determination of that? Because you'd almost have to test the wells of the individual houses to make that determination. And was that done?
My guess is that they did take a look at the extent of the contamination at the time. That would have been a general practice for that kind of thing. So I don't think that there's a need to develop a database for the wells in the center beyond what's already been done to deal with the contamination.
Okay, well, I might ask Frank's opinion of that.
What he thinks, but I would like myself to be able to get a better handle on what the DEP has done and what it's continuing.
You mean you'd like to see the data?
Or just understand what they did and what they're continuing to do now and what their monitoring is telling us. Because it does relate to the work that we do there.
Yeah. Develop a database of information on wells in the beach area that would assist in the quantitative analysis of the saltwater infiltration issue. That has not been done, according to Dave Kinney.
But what has been done was they've got at the beach, they've got a whole new septic system built. And I don't know if that affects this remark here.
So there is no Water Resources Committee now. That's
No, well, that's why we're dealing with
right.
it.
And it's not a lakes and ponds issue, but it is a real concern, especially with sea level rise for saltwater intrusion or properties. And that's generally been an issue for homeowners themselves to track. And if it turns out that they've got a significant problem, one of the solutions might be some community water sourcing from an area that's further inland. I guess the question is that something that the comprehensive plan wants to take on as a planning issue when we're having these climate change issues, rising sea levels? It might be putting people at risk in certain places in the town.
we will introduce an entire chapter on climate change.
Right, but I think this should stay in the water thing as
In the
well.
meantime, I do think as far as the beach goes, there's several things going on. There are major businesses there, and they certainly pay attention to their water. For restaurants, water is a very important resource. So there's the business community, and I think probably it's in their interest. And then also the sewer district, which is a major establishment now, certainly they have addressed water as well. So those would be people to talk to, I would say.
Right, well, I'm going to start with Frank as well. Because somebody's got to know it in our government, in the Lincolnville town office, if there's a problem there. It certainly wasn't mentioned by Dave Kinney. Continue to explore sources of funding well development to serve as sites for community wells. This is apropos of the preceding thing, or in adjacent to densely developed areas such as the beach or Lincolnville Center. Well, Dave Kinney said that was not a priority. The sewer district can offer water, but it hasn't really been needed yet.
Well, and
So that's something
someone
for the future.
suggests that we need more housing.
Right, there will be something for the future. Any thoughts on that?
No,
No, it's a complicated area. Okay, well, we'll be back on all of this. Encourage the requirement of notification of pesticide, herbicide use within the watershed areas. According to Dave Kinney, all state requirements are required. And presumably followed, we hope.
Just talking about the kind of flagging that people put on their properties
Yeah.
when they're treated by a commercial applier. That's probably what he's talking about, but there's no requirement for private individuals to do that.
There isn't, don't companies do that?
I think the companies do it, but I don't think.
But the
that-
companies, when they treat your lawn or treat an area,
Right.
do they not put a sign out?
They usually put little flags on the property, but I don't think there's any requirement for homeowners to do that. I don't know what the thought was behind this, whether there would be something that went beyond those generic state requirements. There are some communities in Maine who have adopted more stringent pesticide and herbicide policies. Question would be, is that something that? we
I'll go to
want
Frank
see?
about it and get more information.
well, we use, can you hear me, Lise?
Yes,
We use Central Exterminating Services for ticks, spray on our property. And because it's near, well, I'm just doing right now. Because it's near the lakes and ponds, they only use organic tick spray. So the exterminating company for ticks anyway is responsible, the one that we use, for not using a more powerful tick spray. So I would say the companies, it's the company's responsibility.
so there's no law that says organic near a body of water. It's, you chose that company because they will put an organic
Well, they
compound.
may,
Well, we don't know. They may be doing it because there is a law.
that's
We
what I
might.
was gonna
That's
No,
what I'm
no.
asking. I'm asking a question.
Yeah,
That's what I was going to say. They probably do it because there is a law. We
Okay.
I
we'll,
think they also offer a non-organic alternative.
yes, they
It's
do.
our choice of their service.
So it was your choice to use the organic?
Yes.
Yes,
yes.
Okay.
They offer, I think they offer more than one solution. One's
Monthly used to-
organic and the other isn't.
Monthly used to have a no spray registry. I don't know what they're doing about that anymore.
Organic and non-organic. Okay, so there isn't, doesn't sound like there's a regulation there.
But I think you should use toxic and non-toxic.
Right.
yeah, yes.
And yes, there are companies around here, they use both, and it's your choice.
Okay.
Or toxic and less toxic.
Depending on how it goes. Okay. Continue to educate the public about regular testing of their wells and other considerations to keep private wells free of contamination. So David Kinney said Maine Water no longer offers that service. Maine Public Health Lab does. Lincolnville does not promote it.
But the plumbers do, that you have working on your wells. They test. And
They do some testing, but
and it's
I
the
don't-
homeowners does testing too, right?
Well, then leave it in. Continue to educate the public about regular testing, because I don't think that's a requirement. But you want to keep it there so that people still think about it and do it.
Yes,
And the question is it the role of the town? Is it something that's put in a comprehensive plan as a priority? It seems as though the whole idea of a water resources committee kind of fell flat because it really wasn't a role, and you have other state agencies that have much more expertise. They've got personnel. And so
Do you want to leave it out?
that would be the question, given
It is a question.
given other priorities, if we feel as though it's otherwise covered. You know, it's covered in real estate transactions too, and that's probably the most effective way of dealing with a lot of these issues is the testing that's done when properties change hands. Some of that is a requirement, some of that is protection that the buyer wants to see in the contract. So I don't think that we can be all things to all people and all issues.
Well, you're trying to have
a plan, and some of the things that I'm seeing here kind of cross that line because there's already something out there. We need to figure out as a town, what is it that we can take on and what's important to the community and our health.
But you also want to be concerned about leaving it out.
Well,
You know, because having it in there reminds people about the importance of it. Not having it there,
did it do that over the last 15 years? I don't
I don't
think
know,
so.
because I mean, how many people looked at this plan?
Nobody did, and that's what I'm saying is that
Well,
so we created these committees that don't exist. It wasn't a priority, there weren't the funds to do it, there aren't even the volunteers to do it, whether or not they have expertise or not. So
Right.
I think it's important to be realistic with this and really focus on the things that we want to see happen for the town.
Well, this is not the last time we're gonna look
I'm
at this.
saying it's not that
Yeah.
these things aren't important, but is it the role of the town to do?
Given that there's so many state regulations, licensing of professionals, business interests, and general awareness is growing, a lot of these things are kind of moot at this point.
That's well stated.
Do you want to leave them out? though?
Well,
That's a
as we
question.
continue with our,
That is a question.
our heart and soul process, we may find out what's more important. We're going to be focusing on what really matters to people, and this may not be high on the priority list.
I think this is a really worthwhile kind of thing, just to be able to have these insights about some of the things that are in the existing plan and how much difference they make and how necessary were they.
Also, at a certain point, you get a technical writer coming in to we have to be in compliance with state laws. And so we don't know all those, and there are some people who are experts in that, and so we may, when we're already finished with this process, another year or so, somebody will come, can advise us about the up-to-date standards. And so it may be, they'll help this language. This
Well,
is a
I'm
little
sure
bit
they
of-
will. I'm sure they will.
This is a very valuable review, though.
Okay, well, thank you all, and maybe next time, would you mind if we review the ones that we reviewed before and have a second go at them?
Sure.
Maybe half an hour's worth, not more.
Sounds
Okay,
good.
thank you.
Thank you very much, Lise, for bringing this to us. I think it's,
Well, it's not the
Organization.
end, because you have to look at it totally, and,
well, this has been one of our longest meetings.
sorry.
No, it's good. We missed a lot of work over the last couple of years. It's good to get this done. Is there anything else that anyone would like to talk about?
No?
Hearing none, we'll adjourn then.
Very good.
Thanks, everyone.
Motion to adjourn?
Well, no, we need to establish a date of our next meeting, so the fourth Tuesday would be
27th of September.
27th of September. Okay. I think that works.
I'm coming in remotely.
Okay, we've got a motion to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks all. Yeah.
Thanks, everybody, for hanging on. I know it's hard out there to stay with the flow.
Got cucumbers pressed
Take
upon
care.
you. Could you all hear okay?
Well,
No,
no, not really. What,
Well, we did yesterday.
Jay and Carrie,
Enough, we heard enough, yeah.
um,
we could hear Rich, or at least I could hear Rich perfectly.
Rich, can you
And you
hear
too.
us?
You two were very clear.
Yeah, and we're clear, you, as you are, but
Yeah.
Lise, Susan.
Gary and Jay.
Gary and Jay, it just bubbles.
It's stressful. It's stressful to try to make that effort, yeah, to hear.
Yes,
It was better last time. I don't know what the difference.
yes, it was
It
better
was
last
much better
time.
last time. I mean, this was really frustrating, and
Yeah.
the minutes will show it because they're going to be about 25 words.
That's okay. Yeah, it makes your work short. You two take care. Good seeing you both.
Nice seeing you, Rich.
Yeah, bye.
Bye. Now how do we leave?
So, to shut this thing down.
Oh, leave.